Hi, and welcome to our first talk on what makes an outstanding advocate. So the very first skill I want you to think about is that of listening. Now, it won't come as a surprise to you that we value listening as one of the key skills that make that outstanding advocate. So remember, we're thinking about what makes the difference between a good advocate and an outstanding black belt advocate. So for me, one of those things is listening, definitely. The problem with listening is that we all think we're good at it. And to illustrate this, I want you to think about the last time you applied for a job as an advocate. I bet you that you put on your application form that you're a very good communicator. Or you might have said, I'm a very good listener. And in the interview, you'd have said that. And it's interesting because it becomes a bit trite. We say this, I'm a good listener, and it becomes very robotic. And that gives us a problem, because the truth is that we are good listeners sometimes. We are good listeners when we have the time to listen. We're good listeners when we have the space to listen. And we're good listeners when we haven't got all the distractions of daily life and stress getting in the way. So I want you to think, as an advocate, how often are you a good listener? Because good listeners who are consistently good are actually very rare. So to illustrate this, I want you to think about the last conversation you had today. Just think about it. Was it with your partner, your children? Was it with a colleague? Was it with an animal, your pet? Whoever it was, I want you to just remember it and recall it. And think about how much of that conversation you spent listening, and how much of it was spent giving advice, or how much of it was spent problem solving, or how much of it was spent on your views and what you think should happen. Another thing that we do is we try and second guess what's coming. So even though I'm listening to you, my mind is actually, well, this is what she's going to say. I need to second guess, because by second guessing, I show that person that I'm with them. I can empathise, but it's not listening. So think about that. How easy was it for you to give your opinions in that conversation? How easy was it for you to spend time on what you think? Now, I've asked you very deliberately to think of a personal example of a conversation, because what you do in your private life will show you a lot about what you do in your public life. So in other words, what you do in private, what you practice in private, is what you do in public. So it will tell you something about your attitudes towards listening. Are you somebody who tries to solve everything? Or are you somebody who's quite comfortable saying nothing? So let's think about listening in a professional capacity. And I've got a couple of pointers that I try and think about when I'm going into an advocacy relationship. So the first thing is that you need to be still, and you need to shut up. You need to be quiet. So in your relationship, how much time are you comfortable with those silences and giving the client lots and lots of space to explore what they think? Now, the problem with this, the problem with quietness and stillness, is that as an advocate, you have a professional role to play. And I want you to think about that first meeting with a client. You have to establish your role. You have to set your boundaries. You have to explain confidentiality. You have to do all of those things before you've even said to the client, how can I help? And that bothers me, because on the one hand, we're saying I'm listening, but the very first thing we do in that first meeting is we talk at them. We talk at the person for 10 minutes. And I'm kind of saying, shh, be quiet, listen to me. And now when I'm finished, right, I'm ready to listen to you. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do those things. You do have to establish your role. But I want you to think carefully about the balance. How much of that first meeting is given to you talking, and how much of that could be done quicker? So for instance, in my experience of working with young people, they know more about confidentiality than I do, because they've heard it that many times. So I could perhaps establish confidentiality very quickly by saying, do you know what confidentiality is? Yeah, know what it is. If I tell you anything that I'm going to kill someone, that's what young people generally say to me. And I know straight away then that they understand what that confidentiality level is. I don't need to spend 5 minutes talking about it. So think with your clients, how can you get that balance right? So I want you to be still and quiet. The second thing I want you to think about is how you create a safe space for the client. Now, some of you might not like this, what I'm about to say, but I'm going to use the word love. And it's a very uncomfortable word in our sector because we like to think of relationships in terms of professional boundaries. But in essence, I want you to think about how you love your client. And for me, love is keeping them in that safe space. And the importance of love or safe space, for me, as a trainer, when I work with young people and young trainers, without doubt, whenever I ask them to draw a picture of an advocate and ask them to draw skills of an advocate, without doubt, the first thing they draw is a heart. First thing they draw is a heart. And when you ask them what that means, they're very clear. They say love, they say care, they say love. And it's fascinating because young people have that clarity. They know what they mean. As an adult, we struggle with that. And as a trainer, can you imagine, I'd be laughed at if I stood up on a training course and said, you've got to love your clients. But essentially, that's what I mean when I say safe space. You've got to give somebody that space to be who they want to be, to say what they want to say, no matter how distasteful that might be for us. I'm not including things like racist views or comments that might be illegal, but certainly views that we don't agree with. We still need to accept those in that safe space, that safe kind of loving space. So that's the challenge for us, I think, is to focus on how do I do that without trying to judge what you're saying. The third skill in listening is about acceptance. Now, for me, acceptance is not empathising. I don't think I need to empathise with my clients. I don't think I even need to understand. I think it helps when I can understand their choices, but I don't think I need to. And the reason for that is because some choices are easier for me to understand because of my values. So if somebody says to me, I want to complain about the way I was spoken to because this and this, I would find that very easy. Or if somebody says, I want to complain that I wasn't invited to my meeting, I would find that very easy. If somebody said to me they wanted to end their life-sustaining treatment, or they wanted to self-harm, or they wanted to make choices that perhaps stop medication I felt was working for them, they're the choices I find quite hard to understand. So as an advocate, I think, well, why do I need to? Maybe it's better for me to just accept that that's their choice. And that's the skill of the advocate, is to really accept that this person's view is their view, and we can promote that. The fourth part of listening I want to talk to you about is about the word but. And I never, ever, ever want you to use the word but. Can you remember the Vicky Pollard sketch from Little Britain? You, the young lady, the young girl from the council estate who was yeah but no, but yeah but no. That caricature for me really sang about listening, and it made me very aware of how many times we use the word but. So in a professional context, lots of professionals will say, I hear what you're saying, but we can't do that. I hear what you're saying, but have you thought about the consequences? And the word but to me just undermines all that good work of listening. And as an advocate, you should never say the word but. All you have to say is, I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. That's all we need to say. It's really simple, but never ever use the word but. Another part of listening is that of focus. So I want you to focus on what you focus on. Just think for a second about where your energy is. Is it on what's being said? Is it on what's not being said? How much of it is given to tonality? So the classic example is when you have somebody that you know and you say, how are you today? They may say the words, I'm fine, but how they say the words, I'm fine, will tell you if they are actually fine. And there's a world of difference from, yeah, I'm fine, to, yeah, fine. Massive difference in the message being communicated. So where is your focus? Is it on what's not being said? Is it about the bigger picture, the idea that the person wants communicated? Think about what you write down, because that's what you will focus on. So I hope that this has given you a little bit of food for thought about how you use your listening skills and how you can become even better so that you go from being good to outstanding.